This is the White Coat Investor Podcast, Milestones to Millionaire, celebrating stories of success along the journey to financial freedom. Here is your host, Dr. Jim Dolly.
This is Milestones to Millionaire podcast number 57. Orthopedic surgeon sells practice early in career. Pearson Rabbits are disability and life insurance advisors founded by and for physicians. This white coat investor recommended agency grew out of one MD's experience with a career-changing on-the-job injury. Today, Pearson Rabbits serves the medical community in all 50 states. At Pearson Rabbits, they help you as a doctor safeguard your most valuable asset, your income, so you can protect the most important people in your life, your family. Pearson Rabbits makes human connections before they make quotes. Go to pearsonrabbits.com today to schedule your consultation with a Pearson Rabbits advisor. Thanks for listening to the podcast. We love hearing from you, what you like, what you don't like. We really appreciated all the information you gave in our survey a few weeks ago, and we're trying to incorporate it into the show. Today, we've got a really great guest who's had a pretty unique path to multimillionairehood early in career. Let's get David on the line and learn a little bit more about him and his pathway to becoming wealthy. All right, our guest today on the Milestones to Millionaire podcast is David. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What's your specialty and how far are you out of training?
I am a orthopedic surgeon. I specialize in foot and ankle surgery, and right now I'm just over 6 years out.
6 years out. Impressive. And you are in what part of the country? In Southeast or Northwest, or where are you at?
I'm in the Southeast. I'm in a suburb of Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And let's get into the numbers. What's your approximate net worth?
Approximate net worth is around $6 million right now.
$6 million. 6 years out of training, $6 million is very impressive. Congratulations on that. Now, how would you divide that up? How much of that's home equity? How much of that is, investments, retirement accounts, real estate, et cetera?
So right now, mine is about $400,000 in home equity. It is about $3.6 million in cash currently. About 2.5 in equity in a company, and then it's about $400,000 in retirement and 529s.
Okay, so a big chunk of that in a company, it sounds like. So we'll hear
Correct.
that story in a minute. And a lot sitting in cash. Any particular reason you're carrying so much cash?
Pretty much because as we get into it, it'll develop, but as the big chunk of my net worth right now is from sale of a practice. And so that's gone through. It just went through a little bit ago. I don't want to rush into investing at all. So right now I just have it in cash, kind of see where the market goes with the current world climate, and before I really get that into equities.
Cool. There's some interesting stories here I can read between the lines that we're going to be hearing about. But before we get into those, what's your range of income been throughout your career?
When I first came out, I was on a guaranteed salary of 400 plus call pay. So it was probably the first year around 500,000. And it's gone up each year. Last year's was the highest I'd earned, which was about 1.1 million.
And how long do you think it took you to become a millionaire?
It took me all of 6 years.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
So that change from 1 million to 6 millions happened very quickly.
Very quickly.
So tell us the story. Somewhere in here, you owned a business, you owned a practice, sold one of them.
Yeah.
What's going on?
So, to be honest, I was a late adapter as compared to some of your audience to the white coat investor. I didn't discover the white coat investor until my 5th year of residency and had made all the cardinal mistakes. I had deferred all my loans, wasn't making any payments. My wife did the same. And so we allowed our debt to accumulate. After, discovering it and getting through fellowship, once I started working, we really attacked that, and we're on our path to just becoming independently financially successful, and had taken $500,000 in student loans down to about 70,000, and had, between savings and home equity, had probably hit millionaire status earlier this year. But I joined a medium-sized practice, 10 orthopedists down around Atlanta, and they, especially in the Atlanta market, there's a big pressure for selling with orthopedics and an equity into private equity. And our practice went through that process. We ended up selecting a different partner. We selected a strategic partner. But recently, after going through about a year-long process, we were able to sell our practice and start an MSO, in essence, which gave us some equity, some security, a lot of power on our negotiating, and personally was successful for me.
Now, how long have you been a partner in that practice?
For 4 years.
For 4 years. Now, what kind of
Yeah.
fear did you have coming into that pre-partnership track that maybe they would sell before you became a partner? Were you worried about that at all?
Oh, for sure. So my fellowship year, I agreed to join that practice my 5th year of residency. In my fellowship year, they called me and said, "Hey, we're looking to sell." So that was 6 or 7 years ago. They went through that whole process and discovered that the practice didn't have the value they thought. And so despite that, I joined and took on the risk that, hey, it may sell, I may not be successful. There were easier groups to join. And we really went down a path once I got here of beefing up ancillary services and things like that. Didn't think about selling for probably 4 or 5 years. And then our practice just continued to grow till we got to the point where it made a lot of sense to do that.
Are you worried at all about not being the owner like you were before, about having less control now for the rest of your career?
A little bit. So the things that we worried about when we went down this was control clinically. And then the other thing is a lot of these deals are structured where you give up a large portion of income in the long term for money up front. I'm 39 years old. I don't want to give up long-term income for upfront money at the scale. So, that model makes a lot of sense, I think, for end career doctors, but doesn't make a lot of sense for someone like me. So and I have three younger physicians with us, and it had to make sense for them long term. So that's why we went with a strategic partner, because we retain a large portion of ownership in all of our various business avenues. So within our practice, number one, I have control of my schedule and my work life still, because our partner really is more, how can we get better on contracting? How can we get better on collecting and the business side of things? And you guys run a successful practice, keep doing that. So as long as we're able to keep doing that, I think our autonomy on a daily basis will be the same. But then from a long-term perspective, a large portion of our ancillary revenue will continue to be ours. And then any growth, we get to share in the growth aspect of that. So I think that the two biggest worries for everybody as you enter into kind of this type of relationship is, what's your clinical autonomy like? And then how's your income affected in the long term? And I think there's equity models where you get some pretty good or pretty heavy income impact. I think the strategic partnership model, they want us to be successful, so they'll be successful. And I think it's a little bit different model.
So how do you feel knowing that more than a third of your net worth is tied up in one business?
Well, it's just, to me right now, it's a number. It hasn't really sunk in as far as what that net worth means. And it is in one business, but right now I'm still in control of that business. And so I think at a certain extent, going to the size practice I went to was a large bet on myself and the people that I'm with to make it successful. And so while we're still integral parts of this business, I think that I have some control over how successful that is. And then hopefully we continue to grow it so that whenever I exit from the business, whether that's, you sign a term for, right now it's 5 years, but it could be 20 years, and I take that equity out, it's worth more than what it's worth now.
So do you consider yourself financially independent now?
I don't. I'm sure if I ran the numbers, I probably would be, but I have a financial advisor that I found through your website, and he asked me when this was all happening, "Hey, what are you going to do the day after this closes?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to go to work, because that's what I've trained for, and that's what I do." And I think it's going to take me some time to realize that I have more flexibility than I used to. But I love practicing and I love operating, and that's what we do. And I think, to be successful in medicine, you have to love it. I don't think a lot of people can be successful because it does take so much time and effort and energy and attention. So.
Well, you've been extraordinarily successful. As I mentioned before we started recording, we just did a survey of our audience, and of those that answered the survey anyway, about 10% are worth 6 million or more. So not terribly rare among our audience, but still impressive, especially so early in your career. What advice do you have for those that are, maybe they're late in their orthopedics residency and wondering if they can be financially successful like you? What recommendations do you have for them?
Number one is not to be afraid of a reasonable amount of risk. Going to smaller practices, going to smaller areas does carry some risk, but it also, I think, has a lot of benefits. Normally, joining larger practices have a longer ramp or a bigger buy-in. For example, my practice, I didn't have any monetary buy-in. It was all sweat equity. So when you became productive and could support a share of the overhead, you got to be a partner, it benefited me greatly. And then I also think that, just figuring out what's going to make you happy, because at the end of the day, that's what you need to be, and then not being afraid of betting on yourself. I think some people go to where long-term it's going to be most secure, and sometimes the biggest reward comes for saying that, I can do this and I can be successful. And if we surround ourselves with the right people and the right plan and take good care of people, then our practice is going to grow. And so it's finding that right blend.
Awesome. Well, David, you've been very successful. Thanks so much for sharing your story with our Milestones to Millionaire audience and coming on the podcast here. And we wish you many years of wonderful practice and financial freedom going forward.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed that conversation. It illustrates a different path to wealth, I think, than we've had on a lot of our podcasts so far. I run into a lot of docs who are very worried about selling to private equity, especially in the first half of their career. And I think they did a pretty cool thing the way they structured this, that David got both cash and retained some ownership. And so it kind of splits the difference, hedges that risk a little bit. And the truth is, you got enough cash out of the deal that if he just lets that ride for the next 10 or 20 years, that by itself would be enough money for him to have a very comfortable retirement off of. So I think it was a pretty slick deal. It's interesting. Afterward, he mentioned that he'd been thinking about going into academics just a few years before, and realizing that decision could have cost him basically $5 million. And so betting on yourself, taking some risk, not being afraid to be an owner. I think those are the lessons that we can all take forward from David's experience to becoming a multimillionaire pretty darn early in his career. Pearson Ravitz are disability and life insurance advisors founded by and for physicians. This white coat investor recommended agency grew out of one MD's experience with a career-changing on-the-job injury. Today, Pearson Ravitz serves the medical community in all 50 states. At Pearson Ravitz, they help you as a doctor safeguard your most valuable asset, your income, so you can protect the most important people in your life, your family. Pearson Ravitz makes human connections before they make quotes. Go to pearsonravitz.com today to schedule your consultation with a Pearson Ravitz advisor. If you'd like to come on the podcast, you can sign up to be a guest at whitecoatinvestor.com/milestones. We'd love to have you on to celebrate your milestone and to use it to inspire others to reach the same milestone. Till then, keep your head up, shoulders back. We'll see you next time on the Milestones to Millionaire podcast.
My dad, your host, Dr. Dolly, is a practicing emergency physician, blogger, author, and podcaster. He is not a licensed accountant, attorney, or financial advisor, so this podcast is for your entertainment and information only and should not be considered official, personalized financial advice.